Welcome to the BrightWord Books Podcast, where we shine a light on compelling stories and the brilliant minds behind them. In this episode, we're joined by author and independent researcher Belinda Alexander-Ashley, PhD, as she takes us inside her gripping debut novel, Faces in the Smoke, Secrets Unearthed. Now, this thrilling tale follows three teens who must navigate a fantastical and dangerous path when a deeply disturbed man leverages his family's legacy in a dark and twisted game of survival. But this is more than just fiction. Belinda's work draws on her decades of experience in the federal probation system, bringing powerful insight into trauma, resilience, and the pursuit of healing. So stay tuned as we explore the inspirations, themes, and deeper meanings behind Faces in the Smoke, and discover how the past holds keys to unlocking the future. Well, Belinda, thank you very much for joining us. This is so exciting. I've had a bit of a read through the book, and I tell you what, I think our readers are going to be pretty impressed with this. So how are you today?
I am doing fantastic, and thank you for taking the time to read the book. I'm just honored that people share their time with me, so thank you.
No, not at all. I would like to say that I read all of the book. I didn't have a chance to do all that, so I apologize there. But at the end of the day, the parts that I did read, I think were fantastic and really got me thinking, actually. So I'm really looking forward to getting into some questions with you on this. So let's go with the first one. Let's get straight into it, because I'm sure our listeners and viewers really want to get into this. So, Faces in the Smoke. Now, it's a unique blend of mystery, adventure, and fantasy, which I was amazed at, actually. But what inspired the core storyline of this trio of teens and their dangerous journey?
Well, I kind of think, for me, it was a combination of my past experiences, my love of history, genealogy, and my storytelling experience, because I was in the federal probation system for 22 years. So storytelling, I got to hear a lot of stories. It really was. And I met some amazing people. I loved what I did. I helped people get back into the community. So it was amazing. So storytelling, I loved. And so this kind of set the pace. It wasn't where I thought I'd be, though, because when I retired, I actually went to school, and I thought I'd be a teacher for college level classes. COVID happened, and that is not where I went. So I had to pivot. And so I had to take my own advice. I'd always been telling people during when I was working, you've got to pivot. You've got to forge a new future. I had to do that. So I had to take my own advice. But in doing this, I put this storyline together from those experiences. A lot of the stories were about trauma. They were a lot of grief, but there was how they were choosing to deal with those coping strategies. So mine was an academic background. I had done some writing academically. So, and then when I got here, I used a lot of those things in the research coming forward to put this storyline together. The core thing I wanted to get across is, because I kept running across when I was doing genealogy, that there was little known stories like African Americans involved in the Civil War. I had not heard that. So when I was doing genealogy, that's some of the things that I'd run across. And I was thinking, somebody needs to write about this. I didn't imagine at the point that it would be me. So I just took it on. I said, you're retired. You don't have any excuses. I took some courses in writing, and this is what it resulted in, is pulling all those things together to come up with a storyline that I thought people would enjoy learning about, plus especially young readers, because these things that I wanted to know. So to put it a long story short, I just pulled all those things from my background, my history, and tried to put it into a storyline and then put the fantasy and mystery parts so that people would actually enjoy reading what I was writing.
Right, exactly. So to make it sort of exciting. And I mean, yeah, you've touched on a couple of things there, like the Civil War and people being involved in that who you wouldn't think would be, which is great to know and to hear, right? And as you say, I think that story needs to be told. And genealogy, there are always buried secrets, right? And so that phrase, long buried secrets are unearthed, is intriguing, of course. So listen, without giving too much away, can you share what types of secrets lie at the heart of the book?
Yes, the heart of the book was a secret. We got a parent that he had this image he wanted to uphold, except for as time goes on, this secret keeps coming up more and more and more. And it led to things that in his 20s that he had a daughter. And so these things unravel and they lead to other secrets being unraveled. So it was like a nest. The first secret, and I'll leave as a teaser, I'll just leave the rest. But that big secret unraveled other secrets, pulled in his daughter and her friends, led to them being kidnapped. It was an unraveling. But the big thing about my story, I wanted to make sure everybody had an angle so that the reader would get a sense of not the person doing something wrong. It was more the story that they had to tell.
Yeah, well, no, exactly. As I say, the genealogy with I can see where you get the idea from in terms of these stories coming out, right? So, I mean, how did you approach building in the fantasy elements of the story while still making it really sort of grounded and emotional?
Well, I'm a planner. When I approach starting the book, I wanted to first of all put the elements. I went out and, to be quite honest, I did some studies, and research so that I could figure out how to start the elements of a book, because I did not know. It's very different from writing academically as coming into fiction. So I did a 3-act model, and then I just approached it as what's the main elements. I want that historical piece. I know that I wanted people to read it, so it's going to have a hook or a fantasy portion or something to keep people engaged. Mm-hmm. And so the characters, I wanted to be something that our readers could engage with. So that's the approach I took. I'm very methodical, so I wanted to put all these things together. It didn't seem very fun when I was putting it all together. I said, but who wants to read it? So for that fantasy mystery, and I started to weave this thing together so that it flowed. And that took me a while, 6 months to a year, pulling all the elements together to make sure, because I wanted the message to be told, but also offer options for unusual things that you can use in nature. It was just an unfolding for me, but it was mostly out of the things I've learned, the genealogy. And in Oklahoma, in 1907, that's when Oklahoma became a state. But before that, it was Indian territory. So people who had lived in this area, they did a lot of natural approaches. They used what they had in the land. And so the culture was there. So I tried to pull that in.
Right, so, which is great. And, that helps to build these characters, isn't it? And the way that you've mentioned about them being likable and people actually liking them, I think that's really important as well. So your main character, though, is pretty intense, right? And so what inspired that character, the unhinged individual, and, and their motivations as well? Where did that come from?
Well, that was part of a story I had read. It's pieces of it, and I kind of put them all together. But he was a motivator for the story. He was actually he was related to the other main character, Baxter, who had the secrets, and he was motivated because he was losing his home. That was a banker, and so the motivation was he was losing his home. So he had to get back at the main character. So they inadvertently, they weren't tied together in the beginning, but because of the circumstances, him losing his home and Baxter burning the books at the school, they kind of came in contact. So the motivation was he had to get back at him. And so when you're pulling those things together, and I had to kind of weave it together so it made sense. But the motivation was he was trying to save his home. He had mental health issues. He was also a brother. He hadn't seen his sister, his family, he was disconnected. I wanted to show that. So the motivation was he had a lot of things going on, but that's life. It's not pretty sometimes. Sometimes it's complicated. And in my experiences, people who are in the prison system, their lives are complicated. It's a lot of things coming together. And so that's what happened. And that's what made me want to pull that character together and put those characteristics together, because a lot of people, they experience that.
I get that. And I think, yeah, definitely complicated lives, it really do. It's not just something that can be easily solved, is it? That's the problem. And just going back to what you said about the book burning at the school and things, that was quite a scary part of the book, that sort of censorship was scary. I mean, where did you get that idea from?
Well, it was actually a newspaper article that had happened several years back, and I was reading about it in a newspaper. So I kept the article. For some reason, it just resonated with me. It broke my heart because I love books and I love reading. So when somebody takes the time to burn books, it really resonated with me. So that's where that came in. And that's a lot of times people that are doing things, they want to hide things. So that was the other character, Baxter Bernstein's motivation for burning those books was burning history, erasing that history. And that's what was happening with the other one. Not necessarily a bad person. In the end, I want none of my characters to feel like everything they've done is a bad thing, but I want to hear the stories. Why did they do what they did? And then I came back and resolved that at the end. But that was the whole thing to me, is in engaging in that way.
Completely makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, going back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, you were talking about nature and healing, and living in that in Indian territory as it was back then before 1907, and personal growth as well, which you've mentioned as tough lives, how to change, how to pivot. Right now, these appear to be themes in your life, really. But I mean, how do they show up in your book?
They show up in my book, but that's how I used the resolutions. When these young ladies are finally escaped, they have to learn to work together, but they learn how to use, and in my previous book, Aponia, who's the main character, the protagonist, she wanted to, she had some rage she was dealing with, but she used this calming stone. And that's one of the things that I thought naturally I had read about. There's in Native American culture and a lot of other cultures, they use nature, like grounding or earthing is what they call it. That's supposed to relieve pain, stress, anxiety. That's what I wanted to offer in this book. Other things that are not just mainstream that you would know about. Okay, we know about generally counseling, therapy, but do we hear about earthing or using a worry tree? And I'd read about that in books, but all these kind of different things to use. I wanted to be a fun element. I turned the earthing into an earth dance. That's one of the things that I thought would be fun for people to know, but people do that. It looks like a dance to me. I took that line from the cultural dancing that Indians do a lot of time, or Native Americans do. They use dances. So I borrowed that concept and applied it to the earthing. But that's the kind of things that I wanted to just expose these teens to, so that the readers can actually engage. So, well, maybe I could do that. And I had actually done that I have a little box of rocks and things like that I got from the Grand Canyon when my kids were young. These are the kind of rocks they use. And when they were sharing the history, because there's a lot of Native American tribes that were in the Grand Canyon, they use these kind of things, the natural elements, connecting to nature, how we connect, the electrical systems that are present. So I tried to incorporate a lot of this into it. So even if you don't have access to counseling or therapy, there are other options. And sometimes kids, they have to be creative. What relieves their anxiety? So that's how I got the natural, because I'd been exposed to that, and I wanted to really expose the next generation to a lot of the things I had seen myself.
Yeah. Well,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. I really like the idea of the stone as well. Was it Aponia? Yeah, who had the stone in her pocket at the beginning as well, I think, wasn't it? And that obviously comes out again during the book, but I think it was purple stone or something. But I really felt that. I could actually feel how that would benefit me. Just a small pebble, something like that, and just to be able to go, just to take your mind away. I could see that. So how did you continue to develop their personalities, the three teens who are basically at the center of the story? How did you develop them and their dynamics as well, not just personalities?
Oh, Well, I used a lot of people in my life. People I've run across, like Aponia's personality. She's bold. She's outspoken. My grandparents, my grandmother in particular, two of my grandmothers were very outspoken. They're bold, especially in times that women weren't really encouraged to have a voice.
Sure.
Back in the early 1940s, 50s, they were bold. They were out there. I took some elements of theirs, applied that up to Aponia. Chloe was a lot more affluent. So she had some biases from her past as well. And then the other character, Ariana, she was fearful, a little bit more reserved. And so I wanted them to have very different characteristics, hoping to connect with the readers. But then I want them to be able to come into their own, emotionally start to connect and build on it from there. So that.
Yeah. So not just being like school friends or anything else like that, but actually growing together as well, I was going to say a team, but not a team, but yeah, a group of close friends.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I just wanted them to be able to see those differences. And hopefully readers are different. We're all different. We all have a different story. So I wanted the girls to have a mix and a variety of characteristics and personalities so that they can work through those.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. And I love the way that you described your grandparents, being bold back in the old days, as it were. My grandparents, yeah, exactly the same. My grandmother, but actually both grandparents, both my grandmothers, exactly the same. And actually, do you know what? My mother-in-law is the same. So, but I think everyone's mother-in-law is like that, right?
I think so as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's probably that. Oh, so let's just have a think. Let's talk about you for a bit. I mean, you mentioned earlier on your career, and now that you've retired, and COVID and things like that, right? But your career in the federal probation system, wow! But that must have given you deep insight into people's trauma, and obviously helping them to transform and pivot away from that. How has that worked? And I think you touched on it earlier, really. How does that work informed your storytelling?
Well, it did in a big way. My vision and what I see as people is very, very different now, because when you see the stories and the accomplishments and the skill sets, it's not about the mistakes. It's about how they overcome them, or the stories and the things that they overcame. So for me, that's in my career, I guess that's the way I've begun to see people as building. And so that's how I built that into my stories. And the storytelling element is I'm pulling these stories and hoping by doing that, I can connect with more people and say there's more hope. There's whatever you've got, you can overcome. I want to be that positive spirit in there. And remind me what the original question, because I want to make sure I answered that properly.
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, I think it's about people's trauma, really, right? And how how you dealt with that, and how you helped them, or you saw how people were transformed and pivoted away from that. So I guess success stories, really. And you've just mentioned that, really. I think at the end of the day, people lose hope, don't they? But if they can be shown some sort of glimmer of hope and helped along the way, and perhaps this is where you've brought this into your storytelling.
Absolutely. And that's kind of where I went when I first finished my schooling for my PhD. It was that trauma element. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Because I first started writing academically, but it was about trauma.
Right.
And see, this was a book called Strategies and Methods for Implementing Trauma-Informed Pedagogy. I did a chapter in this book. And just to give you an example of what I wrote about, it's in chapter 7. It said, Reducing Mass Incarceration Through Trauma-Informed Pedagogy, Reshaping Responses to Trauma in America. So what I did was, after I'd seen all these common threads and how people deal with trauma, that's what I wanted to research. That's where I thought I'd end up, is working academically about in the trauma. As I kind of got more about trauma, I kind of gravitated when I did 2 other chapters. This was in a book that was after that. It was Practical Strategies to Reduce Childhood Trauma and Mitigate Exposure to the School to Prison Pipeline. I've always been close to the prison system, so I stayed kind of close to that. But one of the chapters I did is practical strategies for higher hope learning spaces, reducing childhood trauma in a post-pandemic era. You can kind of see as you start to see this gravitation. I was talking about hope. That's what I instill in my creative writing. I wanted to kind of talk about hope. The other one is not going to surprise you, but I wrote a chapter on integrating family history into post-pandemic elementary learning space, reducing childhood trauma through IGI Global. Those are the kind of things that I wanted. I originally said, well, I want to work and research in this area. So when COVID happened, I had to kind of pivot and say, okay, it's okay to do that writing, but I want to do more. And so the creative writing, because I got to combine a lot of things, the genealogy, but I still wanted to have the trauma related elements in there so that people can kind of start to see more. We can use not only genealogy in the classroom. We can use hope in the classroom. There's actually a science of hope. Didn't know that before I started researching, but there is a whole system on hope. So I wanted to instill that and to make a long story short, that's what I wanted to instill in the book. I wanted those elements in, but I wanted it fun, but with a purpose.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of a literature review, right? So you get to learn all sorts of stuff, which is great. But you know what really struck me about the books that you were just showing us was the school to prison pipeline. I mean, come on. It's like there's actually a phrase for that, which, I'm sure for you being in the probation service for 22 years, it's quite standard for you. But for someone who's outside of that sort of sphere, it's quite interesting to hear that and a bit worrying, actually. But, what do you say about that then?
Oh, it is. And it should worry you. It worried me. That's why I started. There's actually policies that were in place that encouraged, that didn't work for especially poor or students that weren't mainstream students. If they were in poverty, that kind of thing, the policies did not work for them. They were actually being shuttled because of their behavior issues. They didn't have access to resources. They were getting pushed into this, and you may or may not have heard that sometimes people are suspended from school. If you start looking at the statistics, it's generally you can see a trend toward the certain students that were being in this system. And these are the same students that you come into a pipeline, a school to prison pipeline. Usually about third grade, they can tell how this is going to work. They generally are students that are not up to grade level. There's a lot of things we can do, though. That's not the end all be all. I just want to know, how do we combat this? And so that's how that research got started. And after being in that system, I said, we got to do something to fix this. I could point to a lot of the people to do it, but at the end of the day, I said, you can do something. You do what you can do, and then you leave the rest for everybody else.
Well, after 22 years, I think that's fair enough then, isn't it, really? Leave your colleagues to do that. Okay, so, I mean, as we say, 22 years, right? But what, and then you've transitioned over to creative writing after your PhD, which was fantastic. And I've got to ask, what's your PhD in? What did you look at?
Sure, it was instructional management and leadership. It's a degree that generally.
Oh, just losing the connection slightly there. Don't know if you can hear me. Hang on. Let's wait for it to come back. If you can still hear me, that is. Our connection to Texas is not holding. Texas, hold it. Get it?
We go for superintendents or in the education system. Okay.
It's just catching up with itself. Sorry about that. So I think I lost most of that answer. So let's go again. I mean, sorry. I asked you about your PhD and what the subject was.
It's instructional management and leadership. It's from Robert Morris University. And it's usually done for superintendents or people in the education system. Right. So I intended to work in the university system. Like I say, when COVID happened, I started to look at things a little bit differently. And I still want to be fulfilled, but I also was doing a lot of genealogy and a lot of the history stuff because I was reading more. I had more time. We were kind of locked down. So I just did a lot of more things, and I realized it's more than just teaching. I can do more. And I
Gosh.
had to learn.
Yeah, I see. There are some glimmers of hope out of that
Yeah.
all that time. So, okay. So, when you decided to move into creative writing, what was your biggest challenge, and what was your biggest joy? What did you like the most?
Okay. My biggest challenge, I think, is keeping myself focused and then keeping myself engaged with one project. Because when you're doing genealogy, you're doing one line and then you're doing another line. You might find a clue over here. I'm bad about running here and then running there. I had to slow myself down and stay focused on the main thing. So I got into journaling and setting goals so that I stuck with what I was doing. And then I made notes on the other thing and I'll pick that up later. So for me, it was honing it in and engaging and focusing on one thing at a time. And the greatest joy is I'm actually getting to do some things that I never imagined that I would do, but I'm loving it.
Yeah. Go on, such as.
Such as I'm getting to write about some things I always loved, like the history I love, the genealogy I love, and storytelling I love. I get to do that. And when I was in a structured environment, I was always working on different projects, but they were structured. They were in line with whatever whatever I needed for the job. Now I'm the one driving that bus. So I get to do a lot of things that's creative. I get to pull in a lot of things that I want. I do have to keep myself, like I said, I can run on tangents. If you haven't noticed, I can run off in other different directions. I have to pull it back. I've learned that you've got to pull it in. If you're going to finish one thing, like one book, you got to finish it. And then you can start to write or do some other things. Otherwise, I'd have half projects. And I've done that in the past as well. But I'm much better now is focusing on one thing at a time, setting goals, and then journaling.
See, so it's again more positives, right, have come out of all this, which is great. So, your mantra seems to be it's never too late to forge a new future, right? So
Absolutely.
we can see to a certain extent how that belief has shaped your personal journey. But has it looked at that? I mean, how has that really affected you as an author? I suppose the pivoting, this is where it comes in, isn't it?
It is. It has been with the pivoting. For me, I've learned, and this is something that's been a career-long thing that I've had to tell other people. It's never too late. You got to keep going. You got to be in the positive. So more recently, it's become me. I had to apply, but I had to pivot. When COVID came around, I had to pivot. When I started to look at other things, I had to pivot. So it meant more to me now because what I've been saying all along, it now applies to me. And then I'm actually telling my kids the same thing. Okay, it's never too late. They say, well, I've done that. I'm too old for this particular thing. So you're never too old. Mom was doing some things that she never imagined she would do. So they're actually benefiting from it. But for me, I've embraced it. And I just understand me to say, whenever I get down and say, well, I'm tired of this. And no, you ain't going to get tired. What you're going to do is you're going to take your own advice and understand I've got it up on my board. It's never too late to forge a new future. So I remind myself, and it is a part of my life. And I'm trying to invest it in the next generation so they don't give up.
So I think that's really good. It's funny, isn't it? But I agree with you completely about it's never too late. There might be flashes of thinking, "Oh my gosh, is it too late for me to do something?" But I think you're absolutely right there. So, and you've mentioned young people and young readers and things like that. So, what message do you have? I mean, you've just kind of mentioned it, I suppose. But what message do you hope that young readers or those drawn to fantasy, what do they take away from Faces in the Smoke?
I think several things. I would hope they would take away that everybody has a story. We can learn from everybody. I think that there's a history that we can all understand, and that we can work together. There's always things coming out that these young ladies, that's what they learned. We learn together and we move together forward. And there's always options available. We got to look past just the ordinary. And I think that's what I want them to take. They don't have to take just one thing. You can combine things. You can use things that you wouldn't ordinarily, a simple rock. You can go outside. You can do that and say, I can transfer energy to this. I can use this to focus and refocus my life when things get kind of crazy. I can refocus, I can transfer that energy.
And so is that something that you do then? Do you use that sort of therapy, meditation or connecting with nature, as you've just mentioned, about transferring energy? I mean, how does that play a role both in your life and obviously the characters in the book?
Oh, absolutely. I do the stone. I like that. I keep it in my pocket. It's just a little one. And it's just something I can do when I get a little anxious or something's going on that I'm uncomfortable with. I just kind of rub it, and then I back up, take a deep breath. And then that kind of helps me restart again. The grounding, that's something my son actually taught me that. He was talking about connecting with the earth. I actually do that. I take my shoes off. I go in the backyard. I walk on the grass. And it just reminds me, because we're next to a green belt. So the trees are there. Helps me to remind me we're connected to nature. The trees are connected. I'm connected. There's an electrical energy that runs through this earth. So all that comes to me. That's one thing I wanted in the book to start to, and I tried to do it in a fun way with the earth dance, is connecting, making sure that you understand you're connected to something much bigger than what we are.
Yeah. I like that. That's nicely put. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and I've also been through counseling and that kind of thing as well, just personally. So that the traditional works too, but I've also found that it's in the everyday life. Those are things that the earthing came from my son, but he's very, very into nature and to using the natural things around us to relieve stress and anxiety, that kind of thing.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I'll try and do that, I think. It'd be quite nice to feel the grass in between my toes. Right? So when you were writing... Sorry, say again?
I'll say, yeah, just give it a try and see if it helps.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. It's not something that you feel every day, is it? So yeah, just concentrate on that, I guess, and meditate on it. All right. So when you were writing the book then, did it take you a long time or did it come in quickly?
No, it came in time. It took me about six months to writing just the story portions, and then to do the editing and all that took a while longer. I had someone do that part of it, but yeah, it took me a while because I'm very methodical. I wanted to get the elements that I wanted in. Like I used the 3-act process, but I also wanted to make sure the historical part stayed historical. Because in the back of the book, I do put those resources in. Every book that I have, I'm always going to do this, and I'll show you what I mean. You have already seen this, but in the back of the book, I do resources so that people can see the historical portion that are correct. Where did I get that information from? Most of them have state parks. I never knew that. I grew up in Oklahoma and did not realize there was a state park. Honey Springs or an island mound is in Missouri, but I did not know these things existed. But I wanted the readers to have that resource when they walk away to say, I can reach out. I know that portion is right.
Oh, wow. That's nice. It's not a good thing to do, actually. Okay, so your readers, you're obviously thinking about them all the time, and your audience, that's what it is. But yeah. and you mentioned this is the second book to have a premiere in it. I mean, but is there a sequel coming, or future books exploring, I don't know, similar themes, or expanding the world of Faces in the Smoke, perhaps?
Well, we're going to be expanding the world. It's going to be a third in the series. It's going to take Sophia, the younger sister's story, and her adventure. She's a lot more outspoken. She does a lot of creative things with money. She takes advantage of her brothers and sisters. She's got a real, real big personality. So that's where I'm going to be going next. It's tentatively titled Chasing Dandelions. And then that should be finished probably early 2026.
Wow, this is already in the works then. Excellent.
In the works.
Yeah, well, Belinda, it's been fascinating talking to you. We're running out of time now. So that's it really, which is always a shame. We could talk for hours, couldn't we?
Yes, I believe I could.
No, not just you. Don't worry, it'll be both of us. But listen, everyone, I'm sure you'll want to be able to catch up with everything that Belinda has written. So that wraps up another episode of the BrightWord Books Podcast. A huge thank you to you, Belinda Alexander-Ashley, for sharing your insights and the powerful story behind Faces in the Smoke, Secrets Unearthed. Now, listen up, listeners. If you're ready for a journey filled with suspense, buried secrets, and deep emotional truths, Grab your copy today on Amazon and experience the adventure for yourself. So, until next time, keep turning the pages and keep discovering the stories that move us. Thanks very much for joining us, Belinda, and hopefully we'll speak again soon. Take care.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.